Join me today as we finish our doll pajamas. They turned out so cute. Stay tuned and see how fun and easy these are to make. All right, the first step for sewing our pajama top is, of course, removing the pattern pieces from the pattern. And then we're going to pin the shoulder seams and then sew them. We've got a notch in the center of each one of these to help us keep it on, get it lined up just right. Remember, use however many pins you need to get your pieces to stay lined up while you're sewing. Now, I do have a fresh needle in my machine, and I went with a different brand needle. I pulled out my more expensive Schmetz brand needles as opposed to my cheaper off-brand ones that I had before. So let's see if I can get you angled. And where is my, there it is, little piece of fabric. So we've got the machine set on our knit stitch again. We've got our tape in place for guiding our fabric. We'll go up to the edge, and we are going to take our first side. Now this one we're not going to anchor the stitches because there's no need to, because when we sew our sleeve on and our neckband on, both ends of this seam will be sewn across, so we won't need to sew it again. That will anchor it. Now I'm not going to cut the thread. I'm just going to butt this right up against and keep going. Got a little closer to that pin than I had intended to there. All right, I'm going to go to the ironing board and I'm going to press these as sewn and then open, and then I'll be back and we will go to the other end of the table and put the ribbing on. All right, once again we have our ribbing all cut out. Now I'm going to fold it wrong sides together and I'm going to pin that center. I know where the center was because that's where the fold was. Remember, we cut this one on the fold. Now, that center fold, or that's, well, the center of the neck ribbing needs to meet the center front of our pajama top. So I'm going to put a pin there too, just like we did on the ribbing on our pants bottoms. Now, this one has a notch to match, and we're going to not start stretching until we get to that notch, and we're going to stop stretching at the notch on the other end. That's because we don't want this one stretched where it's going to be folded over for the fastening the back. And I hope I didn't just have all of that off camera. I've done it again, haven't I? I've gotten way too close. Okay. Well, so far we haven't done anything we haven't done before. Nor do I think we will on this. I think this is just a repeat of what we did last week on the pants for the pajamas. The only difference is this notch. You see, that's the same distance from the end as the notch on the fabric. I'm actually going to put 2 pins here just so that I make sure everything stays lined up. And now we can stretch it. So let's go to the machine and get this sewn. All right, I'm going to attempt to not put my hands directly in your way, but it's kind of hard the way this is set up. So I hope you're enjoying this series so far, and I hope you're learning things. All right. Now we're not going to have to sew across this because when we finish the ends, the back, we will anchor this then. So now we're at that spot where that notch was. So now we need to very carefully stretch this. And I have a feeling this is going to look a lot better than last week. Oh yeah, it's not fighting with me today. Yeah, that needle I had in here was just, it must have had a rough spot or something. And that happens, especially with the cheaper brands, but the rate I go through needles, I typically buy the cheap brand. To the center. Okay, I've got a hair stuck to the fabric. There we go. All right. It's going to be a very narrow ribbing on this neck. So it makes it a little more interesting. There's a lot more seam allowance than there is ribbing sticking past it, I think. Okay, hit that notch, and we can let go and let it just ease its way through. All right, that's our ribbing. So now I've got to reach my directions. Where are they? Hold on. Oh, there's my directions. All right, we're going to go to the ironing board, and actually before we do that, I'm going to put the cuffs on the sleeves, and I don't think I need to show you that. It's going to be just like last week when we did the cuffs on, like the leg bands on the legs. We're going to do the sleeve bands on the ends of the sleeves. So I'm going to put these on, and I will meet you at the ironing board when we press everything out. All right, those went on just perfectly in the same way that they did on the bottoms of the pants. Let me know if you want to see each and every step, but I figured you've already seen that a couple of times. That's like, I know you've already seen me do the pressing this, but it's a little bit trickier around the neck, and you can see it's a lot narrower. All right, didn't go quite straight there. Now you do have an option anytime you put ribbing on to a garment like this, whether it's around the neck or on the ends of the sleeves or the ends of the legs, you could use your stretch stitch and top stitch along here. That would hold your seam allowance down where it belongs. For this video, I'm not going to do that. I might later in the series. There's a lot of more advanced things that I hope to get to either later in this series, or maybe we'll start a new series, more advanced later on. After we get these pajamas finished, which we'll do today, I hope that next week then we can start decorating doll t-shirts. Hopefully I'll have enough shirts done that I can start a few videos on all different ways to decorate our doll shirts, and then we'll go on to sewing something else. Let's go at the table and pin these sleeves into this top. All right, now that that's all pressed, we need to pin our sleeves into our top. Got our top laid out, and we know that this is the front of the top because this is the single piece. This is the back because on this one it's got an open back. So we need to make sure our sleeves are put on with the front of the sleeve to the front of the top. The way we know that this is the back edge of this sleeve and this is the front edge. So this one goes here, and this one goes here. We know that this is the front of the sleeve because there's only one notch. There's one notch here. There's two notches on this one and two here. There's almost always more notches on the back of something than the front. That's a good way to remember. So now we are going to turn it like this. Remember we made that clip at the top of the sleeve last week, or a couple weeks ago when we cut these out. Bring this down. We're going to match our seam allowance and match this seam line to that little notch, that little mark we cut. Sleeves are a little more finicky to get pinned in, but they're not hard. They just take some patience. If you have extra bits from your notches, it's a good idea to get them off of here because you don't want to sew across those and have them be stuck in your seam, sticking out of your shirt or wherever they're at. I like to pin through that center hump on the notch, on that double notch. Back here, line up the back edges. Kind of wiggle it around through your fingers until you get it lined up the way you want it. And it's gonna take a little persuasion because you're putting pieces that don't really want to go together. They're cut so they'll lay right when they're put together and turned, but in the process of sewing them, they can sometimes argue with you until you convince them that that's what they want to do. Pin the notch, pin the edge. You notice my pins are angled that way over here so that I can get a hold of them easier, and also they hold the fabric better, right? Kind of get this where I want it. And this is another spot where you may want to put extra pins in because you don't want this to move on you. All right. Well, I'm going to pin the other sleeve in off camera, and oops, I'm going to get this so it's even. There we go. All right, I'm going to turn the camera off. I'm going to pin the other sleeve into the top, and then I'll meet you at the sewing machine where we can sew this in. All right, hopefully you'll stay there. The camera keeps trying to tip. Now, we are going to start sewing our sleeve. I'm actually going to sew from the other side. I'm going to sew from the shirt side, not the sleeve side. Because on this one, it's pulling just a bit more that way. I pinned it more for sewing it the other way, but it's fighting with me a little bit. So you guys, hopefully you can see. Keep getting a hold of the tape and not the fabric. There we go. Now you want to make sure there are no creases in your fabric on either the sleeve side or the top side. That's kind of why I'm watching this side, because this side seemed like it was more prone to wanting to not behave. After I get this first sleeve sewn in, I'm going to turn the camera off and do the other one off camera, and then I'll meet you over at the ironing board where we'll see how well I did on these, and we'll get them pressed and ready to pin for our underarm seam. Okay. No, I bet our underarm seam is next. I haven't looked at the directions yet, so I think logic tells me underarm seam is next. All right, I'll see you at the ironing board. All right, both sleeves are in, so let's press as sewn first. Get the other sleeve done too at the same time. Now your goal when you're making this kind of sleeve and putting it in is to not have any puckering, any little, pleats basically put into either the shirt part or the sleeve part. And that one looks really good. Let's see how this one looks. And this one also looks really good. Now I'm going to use my regular sleeve roll here just because it'll make this a little faster to press. You can definitely do this just flat on the ironing board if you want to, if you don't have a sleeve roll. But it's laying right here because I needed it for some sewing the other day, so I'm going to use it because I've got it. And it makes this just look a little nicer when you're done. All right, I'm going to turn you off. I'm going to press the other sleeve and I'll meet you at the table to pin these. And once again, our key spots to match are this cuff. I'm going to start at the cuff on both seams. We have a notch there to help us line everything up, so I'll line that up. And our underarm seam, which I'm going to pin right through there. This notch can be pinned, and the hem is not nearly as important again as it would be if it was already hemmed. All right, I'm going to put one more pin here. I'm going to pin the other side seam, and then I will meet you at the sewing machine. All right, both sides are pinned together. Let's see if I've got enough room between the camera and the sewing machine. I'm going to sew off of my little starter piece. Come on. And once I know I'm into my sleeve, I'm going to anchor my stitches because there'll be no more seams crossing that. I need to move you back just a little bit because I need to get my hands here. Now, I've got this pin right where the cuff is sewn to the sleeve, so I'm going to go as close to my pin as I can without running over it. And I left my pins way over there again, my pin cushion, so I'm having to stack my pins up next to me here on the table. I'm really bad about remembering to bring my pins back to the sewing machine when I use them away from the machine. All right, that pin out of the way. And now, again, I've got the pin at the seam, so I want to go as close as I can. My aim is like 1 or 2 stitches before the pin. I pull the pin out. No more than that. When I'm going along the side, I can pull it out at any point when I get close. See how much it's behaving with this fresh needle that's a better quality? Sometimes quality makes a difference. Typically, like I said earlier, I buy the cheap ones, but occasionally I get burned by that and I have to waste a needle. But that's okay. I have the others on hand too. All right, now we don't have to anchor our stitch here because we're going to hem it next, so that will finish off that edge. So I'm going to turn the camera off. I'm going to sew the other side seam. I'm going to press it. Well, I'll meet you at the ironing board because we've got to press the side seams that we just sewed, and we need to press our hem up. All right, as always, our first step is to press our seam as sewn. And once again, I'm going to use our I'll use this one on the body and that one on the sleeve because it's just a little easier to use the big one for the body. If you have a sleeve roll or have access to one, they're very handy. They're not a necessity. It just makes things go a little faster. And for the video, I like to go a little faster. It also looks a little nicer when you're done. I could definitely do this just flat on the ironing board if I didn't have a seam roll. I'm going to show you a couple of little secrets to make that neck look a little nicer before we start the hem. But I'm going to go ahead and press the hem first while we're still here. And on the pants, I completely forgot to turn them right side out at the ironing board and show you if I had gotten everything lined up right or not. So I will do that on these. See how it looks. Looks good on the inside. I am off a little there. I'm not sure why, but that's not a huge deal. Let's see how so that's off, but that came out fairly well. It's off a little bit in the underarm too. Let's see about this one. This one is pretty good, and that one, they're both off a little bit. For some reason, I'm off a little bit. All right, now we're going to fold up 3/4 of an inch hem all the way across. I'm going to iron it flat first. I am again using my ironing hem gauge, but you can definitely do this. I'm going to do it at 5/8. They call for 3/4. I'm going to do 5/8 simply because I've got the marking for that here, and it works just fine. Watch out for that steam when you're doing this because you're working in tight quarters and that steam is hot. Steam burns really badly, so be careful. Now you could use a fusible tape to keep your hem flat and press down before you hem if you wanted to. I'm not going to today. I do sometimes. Today I'm not. I don't feel like digging it out. All right, I'm going to show you a fun needle to use. First I'll show you a trick to keep this stuff folded down, and then I'll show you a fun needle. All right, I have switched to a plain straight stitch like you would use on woven fabric, and I have my needle centered on my machine, and I have this pulled back where I want it on the inside. I'm going to line up this seam line. Can you see this? This part of the seam where I sewed the seam there. I'm going to line that up with where my needle is. And I'm going to sew right along that, and starting where the seam in the shoulder starts, and stopping just before I get to the sleeve. And now, it's called stitch in the ditch. You don't even see the stitches, but they hold that back. I'm going to do that on the other side, and then I'll be right back. All right, we are going to use a stretch twin needle. These are a lot of fun, and they're great for doing hems. So the first step is to take out our regular stretch needle. And put that in a safe spot so you can put it right back in your machine when you're done. And now, I'm going to put this in. Now you see this has one shank that goes in the machine just like normal, but it has 2 needles. I've changed out my bobbin thread. My thread that matches the top thread I've taken out because we're going to use this. And I've got a white bobbin thread in. Now, I'm going to lift you up temporarily by hand. So I've got this extra post that goes over the bobbin, this is where I wind my bobbin normally, and this post goes on so you can put a second spool of thread, or in this case, I'm just using my extra bobbin, or my bobbin I was using. Now I'm going to run it through right next to the other thread, all the way through the machine, and then I'm going to thread both needles, one with each thread, and I will be right back. All right, I decided that I needed to insert a clip of what this stitching looks like so that you can really understand what the double needle does. After you've threaded your machine for the double needle, like I just told you about in the video, before you start sewing, you need to do some tests. And I probably did 4 or 5 tests before I got this balanced the way I wanted it. First, let me show you what it looks like on the top. You've got 2 lines of stitching that are going to stay completely parallel. And once this is pressed, it's going to be nice and flat. You will need to press it just lightly. It won't take a lot of pressing. But the beauty of this, it looks very professional because those 2 lines of stitching are going to be the same distance apart the whole length. On the back, the idea is to get the bobbin thread, and it's going to be hard to see on camera, but I think here through the black area you can kind of see it. The bobbin thread goes back and forth in a zigzag while the top, to catch the 2 top threads. To get this effect, you need to adjust your top tension. And look at your machine book manual. There's usually some kind of dial on the front of your machine that you turn to adjust the tension. You need to loosen the top tension to allow this bobbin thread to go back and forth. Then you'll need to put it back to where it was to do your regular stitching. You only want it loosened for this stitch. I love this stitch because it has a lot of stretch. That bobbin thread can stretch out all the way straight, and it looks like a nice, just regular stitch. Couple of things to keep in mind. You need to center that needle so that it doesn't hit the foot on either side of your sewing machine foot. Be really careful using that needle in your machine, but it's well worth it because it gives such a good result. Okay, back to our video. I'm going to first, I want to figure out where, yeah, I'll go to the side of my foot. So I'm going to run the fold of my fabric along this side of my foot. That will allow this to get caught on get the stitches caught on the fabric. And this is just something fun to do. You could definitely do your hem just like we did on the other shirt before, but this is just something fun, and I had noticed my double foot, my twin needle, when I was digging through to find a new machine needle. So and they also make twin needles for woven fabrics too, so that makes it a lot of fun for doing on wovens too. Now when you take your twin needle out, when I'm done sewing with it, I always take it out so I don't forget, and I put it away in its case. I totally unthread the top of the machine and then rethread for my new single needle, because just pulling one thread out, you'll mess up your tension in your machine. There we go. There is our dual needle sewing, and it looks great, and it looks more professional, I guess. So I'm going to change the needle back, and we are going to put we're going to put the fastener for the back on. I got to check and see if I've got something before I start that. All right, I was going to show you pressing that, but there was something going on outside, and it was very noisy for a while, so I decided to just get it done. So I am going to start this just below where the seam allowance folds. And this Velcro, by the way, that I'm using today, this is what's left from when we did our other t-shirt. It will be fine for here. And I'm going to do it slightly different on this one, simply because I want to show a different way to do it. And I am actually going to use a 3-step zigzag on both sides, mainly because I want to get that ribbing to lay down really flat, and also I want to sew really well across the ends of these threads that I use to do the hem with, because if I don't, there's a possibility they could pull out. So I want to make sure that that's not going to happen. So I've got the soft side on this side of the shirt, and it's going towards the inside. Now I'm going to take the rough side, And I'm going to start it just about the same spot. It's going to be a little more difficult to pin in front of the camera. I'm hoping I'm getting this where you can see it. Press the crap out of this to keep this all down. Oops. I will probably just sew this. I'm going to pin this back here where I can actually see it. Probably just sew that first soft side down on camera, and then I will do the other side off camera. So I need to go back to the main screen. I'm choosing the 3-step zigzag, which I think we did that. Use that to just put in the rough side of the Velcro last time. This time I'm going to do it for the whole back. I'm going to do the soft too. It works for both. Do an anchor stitch because there will be quite a bit of pressure against this. I couldn't use my sew off piece because I didn't want to start up on the neck on the ribbing, because I didn't want the tan stitches to show on our black ribbing. This isn't as decorative on the back, but it will hold the Velcro on really nicely, and it will hold this nice and flat. 3-step zigzag is something I use a lot with knits. All right, I'm going to turn the camera off. I'm going to sew in the rough side of the Velcro, and then we'll look at this on the doll. Well, there are our pajamas on our doll. I think they turned out adorable, the whole set there. I'll have some pictures on the blog of her so you can see the whole outfit here, but I think those turned out great. They were a lot of fun to make. I hope you enjoyed this series, part of the series so far. Be sure and ask any questions you have. If you haven't subscribed to the channel, I urge you to do so and to hit that notification bell. We are going to be doing some fun t-shirt decorating coming up next, I hope. And and give a like to the video and make a comment too. I'd love that. I will talk to you later. Bye.